Hello, and welcome to the Toxic Mold Sex podcast. My name is Miriam Khalili. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing the personal mold story of one of our generous donors of Malachi's Message Foundation, Karen Ferris of Karen Ferris Law. I'd like to also welcome my co-host, Emily Rachel.
Thank you, Miriam, and welcome to today's episode. We are here to interview one of my favorite people. She's known as the Mold Attorney of Texas, but we're not here to talk about an expert interview. We're here to hear why she is so passionate about what she does. She has her own personal mold story, which is what changed her careers about 20 years ago. She's been practicing law for 29 years, but for the last 20 years, she has been helping people who are going through mold get the justice that they deserve. So Karen, before you go into your mold story, can you kind of describe to people and tell people what your life was like before you ever found yourself in a toxic environment?
I will tell you, I was energetic, and my mother used to say that she would say, Karen, what are you doing? Because I don't know if I can sit on the sofa and watch you run around like a crazy person, because I had so much energy. And my mother's a little different than me. She likes to relax. She taught college, and she would come home and grade papers. And she said that I used to drive her crazy. But besides my own family, I used to, I ran the White Rock Marathon. I bicycled about 40 miles a week, and I did the Hotter Than Hell 100 in Wichita Falls. So to keep up with that, I had to ride my bike and run. And I had one child, and he would run with me and bike with me, along with my ex-husband, who was a police officer. And we lived in Grapevine, and so we had a lot of nice, at the time it was more rural, and so we had lots of nice area where we could ride and run ride our bikes. At that time, you could ride your bike around the DFW airport, and there wasn't any security, so that was nice. And I decided to go to night law school when I was 35 or 36. And so I was working in a law office and going to night law school. So that took a tremendous amount of energy to do that, because I was taking 12 hours of law school the first year, and then I think 9 hours after that. I did it in 4 years instead of 3 because of night law school. But I graduated at 39 from law school, and because I'd worked in a law office before that, I was able to pretty much hit the ground running. And I do not think that I would be able to go through law school now, because it takes so much dedication and energy and mind focus. Your mind has to be able to focus and study, and it's just law school is really difficult. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I think it's at least as hard as being a doctor, just a different subject. Some doctors may disagree with me, but and then taking the bar, the Texas State Bar is really difficult. You have to study to take that. And I think, I took Barbary, and then the bar is over 2.5 days. And when I took it, the first day was a multi-state. You have to pass the first half of the day, and you have to pass the second half. Now I think they make it even harder, where you have to pass each section. So I was probably lucky on that. Then the second day is written, which is now probably computer. So when I took it, all the females were worried that their handwriting would get them scored lower. They were afraid of innate bias. So all the women were practicing writing. So there was an extra thing to it. So because we used blue books, and no one wanted to get scored lower innately or inferentially because their handwriting looked feminine. So that was kind of interesting. But by that time, my handwriting had become so ruined from taking notes that I don't think my handwriting looked any different than probably. It looked more like a doctor's. Can you read it? It better be legible. But and so that all was. I was so glad that I was able to do that while I still was, well, but I didn't know what mold was, so I was able to do that. My son graduated from high school and went into the Marine Corps. And so I've been driving to my office in Dallas, which was almost an hour drive. And I decided to, I was getting divorced and I decided to move to Dallas so I could be closer to work since he was in California. And so I moved to what I thought was a really nice apartment complex. It was 4 or 5 years old. And that's when unknowingly my mold journey began.
That's so it definitely sounds like you had everything you needed as a healthy person to tackle some really challenging accomplishments. I don't doubt how difficult it is to become an attorney. And so you did great. And then you said you moved into this apartment complex, and it sounds like that's when everything changed. That's when you started to get sick. So can you tell us what happened from that point? Was it just the apartment complex, and what was that part of your story like?
Well, I was moving from a house to an apartment, and they looked really nice from the outside. And like a lot of apartments, they weren't able to show me the apartment I picked, which is a frequent thing that happens to people, So here's a floor plan, So when the apartment became available and I got to see it, I just started crying because moving from a house to an apartment, it was so small. I was like, oh, I can't live. It's too small. So my dad said, I know a corporate apartment. Let's rent you that, but until they can get you a bigger apartment. So I moved into a corporate apartment until a larger apartment could become available. So instead of a smaller apartment, I got like the largest 1-bedroom apartment. And when I was in the corporate apartment, I had a Pomeranian and a cat and me. And the cat was scared she wouldn't come out from under the bed. The dog was fine. I was fine. It was different, but we were good. And then the apartment became available. And so the things that happen are things that I've noticed as I've worked with other people, but I had no idea what was happening to me. And I moved in like the 2 days before Thanksgiving. And I started moving my things in, and I had all new things. And I'd never, I had allergies before I moved in, and it was pretty evident. I realized it because I listened. I'm sure y'all are too young to remember that old recorders where you could tape your greeting and listen to it. And I listened to mine and I was going, hello, this is Karen, and so I realized I needed to go to an allergist. So my son and I, we went to an allergist and we got allergy shots while he was in high school. And that really cleared up my sinuses. So that was the only, kind of problem that I had involving any type of a head thing, and allergy shots made it 100% better. No more runny nose. And so I moved into this apartment, and I was going to fix Thanksgiving dinner for my dad and his wife. I was so excited. And I wasn't in there 24 hours before I got the flu. And I mean, I got the flu so bad that I was just so sick, I couldn't even cook. My dad ended up going to Luby's, which isn't even around anymore, and getting a turkey with all of everything. And it was all I could do to put it on the table, and I didn't eat, you know. And so I thought I had the flu. And, you know, I had never gotten the flu before, except when I was in college, which was way back in the 80s. That was the last time I had the flu. And so I was a little surprised that I got the flu, but I got over it. And then a few months later, I got bronchitis. And I had never had bronchitis. And my ex-husband and I were still friends. And he was really good at just observing people. And he'd see me over the last 6 months, and I'd had bronchitis twice. And he said, Karen, do you realize that you're sick all the time? And I thought, you're exaggerating. You know, I'm divorcing him. I'm thinking he's just trying to, you know, make a big deal out of nothing, you know. And I didn't give him any credibility. You know, I probably should have listened to him, but, you know, I didn't listen to him. And I continued to get bronchitis on a regular basis. Not one doctor that I went to, and I went to the same doctor, said, well, no one said to me, why are you getting bronchitis all the time? You know, no one tried to question that, you know. And then I moved into a 2-bedroom at the same apartment complex. And things just, I didn't know what was happening to me. I started having numbness and tingling in my fingers and toes. I was 42 at the time. And it would hurt so bad that I would lay in a chair upside down to try to relieve the pain in my feet. And I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know who to go to, so I didn't understand what was happening to me. And in that apartment, I think the mold must have been worse, because in the other apartment, it was pretty much, or it could have just been an accumulation. But in that apartment, I started having, I think it was tachycardia, because I started having what the fire department called a panic attack, but I didn't think it was a panic attack. But I had this, and this is where I relate to people who think people that are exposed to mold, other people say they're crazy. So without any type of anything unusual happening, one weekend, my brain just started like sending me messages like, if you lay down, you're gonna, you know. And it was really, really freaky. I didn't understand. And I really, really thought that if I laid down, I was gonna die. And so I started walking around the apartment, and then I decided to go outside. And I was walking outside, and I would feel better a little bit walking outside. Then I would go back inside, and I would start feeling worse again. But I really thought I couldn't sit down. I couldn't lay down. I thought if I laid down, I would die. And that was one of the scariest things I've ever been through. And finally, my boyfriend called 911, fire department came, they said, oh, you're just having a panic attack. Well, I didn't think it was a panic attack, because I'd never seen a panic attack that would last for, 36 hours, continuously. So I just thought, well, I got to find out what's going on, but I don't know what's going on, So meanwhile, I'm having headaches that don't ever quit, and I'd never had migraines in my life. My mother had, and I started having migraines. I would only have like a 5-minute drive to work, I would get in my car and I would just be crying. I didn't know why. And I thought, why am I crying? I love my work, and tears would just be coming down my face. And I would just be sobbing and think, this is terrible. Why am I crying? And I didn't know. And then I had a grand mal seizure in the back of our car. And I went to the hospital. They did a MRI and they came back and they said, well, you don't have a tumor and you're not having a stroke. So that was their answer, mainstream medical's answer to that, So okay, well, you might want to go see a neurologist. So that was the beginning of a neurologist who could not figure out what was going on with me. And I went through 3 EEG studies where they kept me awake for 3 days. And he was like, I've never seen anything like what you have. You look like your brain is acting like you're having a seizure, but you're not exhibiting seizure symptoms. Like, even though I'd had a grand mal, he was like, you're not doing anything. Your body's not doing anything. So he was like interested in me like doctors are with, weird things, and it was just awful. So they didn't know what to do, and they didn't know what was causing it. I didn't know I was exposed to mold. And so he put down that I had refractory, which means unknown cause, a seizure disorder. People don't get seizure disorder at 42 for no known reason. And I went through 9 different drugs. None of them worked. And I have a vagus nerve stimulator, which was brand new at that time. I was one of the first people to put it in. It's like a pacemaker, and it goes up. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but like I have a wire implanted right here. And so that wire sends a shock to my vagus nerve every 30 seconds. So I've had 4 battery changes down here. And so every 30 seconds, my brain gets a shock to try to keep my rhythms normal in my brain. And then if I feel like I'm going to have a seizure, then I have a magnet and I can swipe it and that can help try to stop a seizure. And so to this day, I am still on seizure medication. And if it wasn't for mold, I would only be on a statin, which I can thank my father for heart disease and aspirin. So, I can't begin to tell you. I see doctor shopping. I had so many medical records because I went to so many doctors. Like, as a person, when you don't know what's happening to you, you get a symptom. I didn't know what was going on. I went to a doctor. They don't know the answer. They just give you here, take this. At one time, I was on multiple different types of medications, none of which addressed the issues, which would have been mycotoxin exposure, And the only way that I found out that I was exposed to mold was because it was on the news after I moved out.
When you moved out of the apartment, before you saw this news segment that made you aware of the mold in that complex, did you start to feel better?
No, because I took all of my things with me, not knowing I'd been exposed to mold, and I did not feel well. So I was in bed a lot or sleeping a lot. And so I was in the bed that was, exposed to mold, not knowing that was the problem,
You were sleeping in a contaminated, bubble almost. So I'm curious, was this news segment specifically about the apartment complex that you had been living at, and they had
Yes.
discovered mold at that place.
Yes.
Wow. I'm guessing other people got sick and there was some sort of testing or something that was done that created this news story. Do you mind to share just a little bit about what that was?
A SMU law student was living there, and she uh, went to her attorney, I think, went to the news, and she thought they filed a lawsuit, and that's what made the news. And we just looked at each other and we're like, oh my God, like light bulb goes off in your head, I mean, the next day, that we filed a lawsuit. But I mean, it's when when we did document production, I represented myself for 4 years. So I went and looked at 88,000 documents. And there were so many people that just signed NDAs and were given several $1,000s. And so, there was no way to know, and they weren't not telling anybody, So that made me really angry, that they knew about it and were telling about it, because in the complaints you could see people were complaining about mold here, mold there, and they would say, okay, move out, NDA, give them a couple $1,000s, and so it was very disheartening, to know that a corporation knew about that much mold and had that corporate mentality of, let's just throw a little bit of money at it and see how long we can go before we get caught. The typical, corporate mentality that's still out there today, unfortunately.
Yeah. So they were bribing people essentially and then turning around and renting units, knowing that there was a problem, to new residents rather than just using that money to potentially fix the problem.
Correct.
So Karen, you're representing yourself in this lawsuit, right?
Right.
It took you 4 years. How did it end? Can I ask?
Well, for me, I could not find anybody that I thought can give me care in terms of my physical care. And I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker trying to practice law and do this lawsuit. And so after 4 years, I hired an attorney to help me. It was it ended up being a long journey. And I can't disclose anything about it because I've signed a non-disclosure agreement. So I can only say that, I settled it to my satisfaction. That's what I'm allowed to say. And, but, I can say that unfortunately for me, I didn't discover the right medical providers until 2007 when I discovered Dr. Johnson. And in 2008 is when I think, let's see, yeah, in 2008, I've been seeing Dr. for probably 2.5 years, and I probably spent $40,000, which I've seen a lot of people do, whether they go to California or Florida. People offer clinics, to try to help them. And every time I went, it was $5,000 or $7,000 to do blood work, which is what real time does. Real time is, your blood work or your not urine, or, if you do Serolab, it tells you what antibodies you have. But we didn't have a lot of that back then, and I had found him actually at a bar function. He came and talked about mold, and I thought, well, I might have found someone that can help me. And instead, he ended up putting me on that antifungal that I was taken through a PICC line at home for 9 months. And, that was, that thing cost $2,200 a day, which my insurance paid for. You'd think somebody would have figured out that you should have only prescribed it for 60 days instead of 9 months, because that was the problem. And sometimes he was in spring, and sometimes I didn't feel like going to spring. I felt so bad. And I would be the only one that could drive. And so I'd have to cancel an appointment, wait till I felt good enough to drive. And every time he would go, I go down there and he'd be like, well, you're just not getting any better, And so he prescribed me Cancetus, which is that antifungal. And so then on December 22nd, I was shopping at the mall for Christmas. And that night I was in McKinney Medical Center, and they thought I had the flu, and instead I had complete toxic shock syndrome. And what saved my life was they had an infectious disease doctor that came every 60 days. And he said, this isn't the flu. She's got complete toxic shock syndrome, sepsis. Your temperature doesn't go from 105 to 96 with the flu. So, and he probably saved my life because they didn't know what they were doing. And at first, but once they got on the right track, they did, because I had, I don't recall much because they put me in a coma, but I was on life support, 24/7 dialysis. I had 25 IVs and 2 feeding tubes. And then, I may get this wrong, but then on Christmas, I started having hemophilagic sepsis, when you start bleeding. So I was too sick. They wanted to remove my intestinal tract. That's where they thought the bleeding was coming from. But they told my dad I would die if they removed it. So they couldn't remove it. And so my blood wasn't clotting. So they kept transfusing blood. And my dad said the wall, every time they put a blood transfusion in, they will put a paper on the wall. And he said the wall was covered with papers. So by New Year's Eve, they told him that he was going to have to make a decision to pull the plug on me. And my dad is so stubborn, and he decided he would rather have me bleed out than pull the plug. So they kept going, you're going to have to make a decision. And he kept like waiting for me to do something, I guess. And we had people from our church in the waiting room, and they were all praying, and my family was there. And right when they were just really on him, they finally came back and said, well, looks like her blood might be clotting. And he was like, I told you. So he if it would have been my mom, I think she would have pulled the plug, because she always does what doctors say. But because she's like, okay, if you think that's the way it should be, all right. But my dad was a rebel. So then when I woke up, my dad called me a bobblehead for 2 days, because I had life support in me for the tube for so long that he said I was like this. uh, 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 for 2 days. And so he wasn't sure I was going to be a normal person. So that's what he was calling me when I woke up, bobblehead. But he was at the bottom of my bed when I woke up, and he said, "Girl, you don't know what you've been through." And I was like, "Yep, you're right." But I'm sure he'll tell me, you know. But I will say and Emily, it's so nice to have your family to be able to be there for you, because unlike COVID, when people weren't able to have family there, my brother and my son have told me that the whole time that I was in a coma, that they were there talking to me, telling me, to fight. And so, you never know. I don't remember that, but I don't think I probably would have lived. But I do think that when I woke up, I was paralyzed from the neck down and couldn't move anything. So I had to relearn how to. They started out with my fingers. I would just move my fingers, and it hurt so bad. And so I would look at the physical therapy guy and I would go, "I hate you." And he would just move my fingers. He just started with my fingers, because when you're almost dead, you put out all those bad chemicals. Just it's almost like lividity, but you're not dead. But so I can remember that I was in rehab and I got this jacket. I put this jacket on and I couldn't move my torso. So I pulled it on over this and I got it around my shoulders and then onto this other arm without, you don't realize how hard it is to move if you can't move your torso. So my mom and dad come to see me and I'm like, "Look, I put this jacket on." And it's all bunched up around my neck because I couldn't get it behind me. And then I had to wear those braces that wore in the 50s, for March of Dimes, to learn how to walk again. So I was like, "Look, Mom, I'm walking." But I I still had neuropathy from my thighs down. So when I would go to the neurologist to check it, he was like, "Take the needle," because they were checking numbness. And he would go, he put it in my thigh, and he would go, "Can you feel that?" And I go, "Nope." And "Can you put it in another place? Can you feel that?" "No." And so finally he stuck it in his wrist and he goes, "Yeah, this thing is working." And I'm like, "I told you." But so he didn't believe me. But so now I only have neuropathy. It's taken this long to get it down to my ankles and feet. So they just feel like they're on fire most of the time. But that's better than not having them. So it's been a strange journey. I mean, I can't ride a bike or run or ski like I used to, but I'm alive and I can help people. And that's what matters the most to me. So I always tell people your life may be not the same path that you were on it before. It's going to be a different path, but that doesn't mean it can't be a good path. It's just going to be different.
It's taken you 20 years and you're still improving. And you've been able to take your nightmare and use it to help others today. Because before you were practicing a different type of law. And then when you went through this, because you went through this, you changed your practice around.
Yes, I was doing employment law, and I was having a good time doing employment law. I liked it. I was helping females. I enjoyed helping them. And it was a lot of fun. A lot of times during the times when I would be laying in bed with a horrible headache, I would say, I would feel bad, because I would be like, "God, why are you punishing me? Why are you punishing me? I feel like you're punishing me. What have I done? What have I done wrong?" And people from my church would come And they would say pretty traditional things like, well, when God, you know, closes a window, he opens a door. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I would be so rich. I could fund your foundation for the next 10 years, because I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that, and I know people get tired of that. And so I was just like, I can't figure it out. And so, I mean, all I tell people, I think they might get a little tired of it, but I got kind of we don't always know the plan. And I don't think that God gave me or made me move into an apartment with mold. I think there's evil in the world that comes from free choice, and people do evil things, and I happen to step into it. So can good come of it? Yeah, I think good can come of it. And so did someone let me in on the plan? No, but that's not how it works. You have to figure that out for yourself. So, I ultimately did figure out, well, okay, I can relate to how people are feeling when they call up. Sometimes people will just start crying because they tell me their symptoms, and I say, I understand. And they'll say, well, you're the first person that has said they know what's happening to me. At the same time, sometimes I can be hard if I feel like somebody's whining, that is like trying to fake it or make money out of mold. I don't like that, and I can be like, well, did you almost die? So I can be the other way. I like, and I think a jury can tell genuine people, and I think a jury can tell if someone's really harmed, or if they're looking for, or if the person's looking for a money grab. I think that's important. And I'm not saying I'm the best detector, but I think that a person can tell who's been through it when another person is really suffering, because there's just a note that you can't fake, that tells what they're going through or their experiences, like they've been to so many doctors and they didn't know what was wrong. Nothing gave them a clue. There's just so many ways you can tell. And people that have been exposed to mold, there's no amount of money that can make their life right. And those people know it. You can't get any amount of money that will give you your life back. Just if you lose your life, no amount of money can give that life back. So those people recognize that they're damaged, but they're going to have to move forward in a different direction, and that they hope that they'll get compensated. And that mold is a new field. We're still working on it, and we hope to get them as much compensation as possible. That every case is different, and every defendant is different. Every land, every owner is different, and that's why we do what we do, is to bring out that message, to make more owners and managers cognizant of the damage that mold does, so that they take responsibility for it and realize that by painting over it, they're making it worse. And doing the NDAs, not disclosing it, just like we have the new rule about you have to tell someone if an apartment's been flooded. It would be great if we had a rule that could be enforced that your apartment has had mold in it, just like houses. If you get a report, you have to tell, if you're selling your house, that your home has had mold and it's been remediated. That would be great, because people's lives are at stake, and their health is at stake, and that's the issue. I firmly believe that mold will be, is and will be the next asbestos. It's just a matter of time. Science catching up with it, you know. But that's the attorney part and the personal part talking, you know.
That's helpful though. That gives, I think, a lot of hope to people because everybody wonders, I went through this. What is the outcome of all of this? Will we ever see change? And so I think hearing from someone like you that you think mold is the next asbestos it is a little bit uplifting to think, yeah, at some point there is going to be this massive shift in awareness where it's not going to be acceptable anymore. And you're going to have to put up a containment to deal with it that's going to be expected rather than just hiring the handyman to come in and take it out like it's no big deal, like a lot of people do currently. So I think that's something hopefully we all have to look forward to, that it will be treated like asbestos.
Well, that's what we're working for. That's what I know y'all are working for.
Mm-hmm.
And science is catching up with it. You know, the problem is dosage, like formaldehyde exposure. When you're in an apartment, like, and you have an air quality test, you can show that there was mold, but that person who's been there, like I was for 2.5 years, you don't have any idea what type of dose exposure you had, you know, and they make it harder by what they do. But when we look at mold, the most important thing to understand about mold is a damage. It's not the start. If it's a formula, A plus B equals C, mold is C. A plus B is what causes mold, you know, maintenance, negligent maintenance, construction defects, which allow the conditions for mold to grow. So when mold is treated as the damage and not the source or the beginning, then, you know, when people start taking care of their properties and take care of the source, then mold won't be the seed, won't exist. And that's part of it, is when these people get properties and they don't want to do maintenance or take care of construction defects, you know, because mold doesn't just happen. It occurs because there's a problem. And that's the problem, is they don't want to fix it. The problem, right?
Right.
So, I mean, do I miss skiing? Yeah, I love to ski. I've skied in Europe. I've skied in Eastern Vermont. I've skied in California. I've skied in New Mexico. I've skied in Colorado. You know, we used to have a bike rack on our car and you take biking trips and go all over. That would be something I would have liked to share with my grandchildren. But, you know, there's no point in going, okay, well, and whining about that. You just have to move on. And so that's why you've got to make a new path and find other things that you can do, you know? So I miss some of those things, but I try not to dwell on them because I'm happy to be here, because I might not have been here. And it's scary to me to think that I might have died in a coma and never even knew it. You know, that's scary. So I'm glad to be able to be here and help as many people as I can, because I don't have a retirement plan. You know, it's just my retirement plan is no retirement plan. So I figured that if God let me live, I'm going to be working on mold. So you may have to be pushing me around in a wheelchair, but that's what I'm going to be doing.
I'll happily do that. And you know, one thing that you touched on, which I think, you know, a lot of people need to hear, is, because I get this a lot too, and I went through this in my own journey, is you have to realize that this is good. This is your new life. You got to figure out what your new life is going to look like, what your parameters are, and hope that you're still going to continue to improve and you can get back to your old life
Right, right. That's why I think on my email I have a quote from Lonesome Dove. Yesterday's gone on down the river and you can't get it back. Larry McMurtry, Lonesome Dove. So I'm kind of harsh about that. It's gone. Can't
I
get it.
watched that series, the water moccasin episode terrified me for life.
I read the book and watched the series multiple times, and it's like that's one of my least favorite scenes. But I love that quote because you have to move on, because if you get caught dwelling on what you've lost, you will never be able to move forward. And I'm not saying you shouldn't grieve, because I think everybody has to be able to grieve
Yeah.
their loss.
There's a big difference between, you do have to go through that natural grieving process.
Yes, I think that's really important. But at some point, if you're like Faulkner and you just believe the past isn't gone, it's never even really past, well, then you're going to get stuck in some drama that you never get out of. And so if you want to be a victim for the rest of your life, you can choose to be a victim. But so we don't control what happens to us sometimes, but we do control how we react to what happens to us. So yeah, do you might need to talk to a therapist? Yeah, I spent a bunch of money in therapy too, but that was helpful, because it's maddening because someone didn't put plumbing in right and vents in and things like that, so that it made you physically ill. I was saving all my stuff and I finally had to throw it out, because if I went and looked at it out in the garage, I would start crying. So I decided that wasn't healthy for me. And I was saving it because I thought it might help someone else. And then I just realized this isn't helping anyone, it's just causing me trauma, So I saved a couple of sets of interrogatories and stuff, but that's it. But even those aren't as good as the ones that we have now. So, because everything's changed and grown so much from technology. I mean, when I was involved in it, we had to use a toxicologist. Well, now real time is that toxicologist, So we didn't have that. We didn't have the license. I think did licensing go into effect in 2005 or 2003? I can't remember, but either way, it was like simultaneously with it, So there was no air quality testing when I lived there, So it was very different. So just, I think, look how far it's come since then. So you think, look at the leaps and bounds that it's made in that amount of time. And now I think it's just going to grow infinitesimally because of the science. Now we have PCR wipes, and I think, frankly, y'all should educate more mold assessment consultants that are out there in Texas that aren't using, to use them, because I see a lot of sampling where they just do air samples. They don't even know about PCR. So when you think about that, all the types of testing that we have available to us now, and it's just crazy. So I do think that, and then the NCBI articles, that show hyperbaric is good for people that have been exposed to mold and other types of. I think hyperbaric is the best form of treatment, but there are some other things, obviously avoidance, and some people benefit from some other supplements, I know, but I think that's a decision that has to be made by that person and their doctor, because other people don't, I mean, and other people don't detox the same. I know some people have trouble detoxing and some people detox too fast. So that's the other thing. That whole problem is mainstream medical doesn't like mold because there's not a one pill that you can just take to fix it off. So big pharma is going to stay away from it unless there's just one cures all type of thing, you know.
And they can profit on that one thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, we are totally in agreement. We really believe people have a right to choose what is the best path for healing for them and what type of treatment that looks like, because there's so many different options that are out there. And I'm one of those people that doesn't detox. So I need a different approach having MTHFR. Somebody that doesn't have that, they might heal much more quickly. And so everybody is going to have such a unique outcome and path. And so I love that Lonesome Dove quote. It's just very inspiring and to the point at the same time. And I think that's a great part of this discussion is, all of our paths are going to look different, but we just shouldn't sit down and whine about it because somebody over here is having great success with healing and somebody else is potentially taking 20 years to heal. Everyone's going to be unique and different. And that's one of the funny things about mold. If you want to think it's funny, I guess it's interesting and it's unique. But what a great message to people.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you both.
Well, before we end the interview, is there anything else that you would like to share with anybody who's watching this that you think that they should know if they're going through mold right now?
Just that you will get better, and no one can tell you how long it will take, and you may have to suffer. But what I tell people, because this is what I told myself, people would say, one of the most common questions people say on the phone or in person, how are you? And I would say, I'm fine, whether I meant it or not, because a lot of times people don't really want to hear whether you're fine or you're not fine. And you just have to have your internal struggle and you're pushing through. And if you've been exposed to mold, one thing that you need to do is treat yourself kindly. And if you have to force yourself to do something, an activity, and you do that activity and you're tired because whether you have brain fog or chronic fatigue, be nice to yourself. Let yourself rest, don't punish yourself because, maybe other people don't think you have mold illness. Sometimes people in your own family don't believe you, but just trust yourself and be kind to yourself. And if you've done something that exceeds your normal limitations because you were required to by your job or by a family event, take care of yourself and don't be ashamed of it, because that's one of the things that I learned is that I would have to push to do something or to meet a deadline. And then it would take me like a day or two to recover from that. And if I didn't do that, then I would pay for it and it would take me longer. So if you don't listen to your body, then it's going to cause you a problem because your body is trying to tell you something. And in the middle of all that, when you're really, really sick, if you have to sleep, just sleep, because sometimes, that's what your body's saying. That's what helps you recover. And at one point in my recovery, I would make a list because I was so used to being able to do things, and I would make a list of like 18 things because I was like normally would do so much, But the very first thing was get up, and I would write that in big letters, get up, and then I would take a shower, and that would be sometimes the only two things I would accomplish in that day. And so I would say, don't be ashamed if you're really sick and you're in the middle of brain fog and chronic fatigue and aches and pains and all of that, where you're just starting to heal. Say, hey, look, I did these 2 things, instead of being ashamed that you didn't get the other 16 things done, because we're kind of taught to the way that we were raised. If you're in type A personality, you need to do this, you need to do that. Well, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't help anybody else. So this is a real illness, and you need to take care of yourself so you can get well. That's my advice, because I had to learn that the hard way, because I was by myself. I'm practicing law, but at the time it was my husband, but he's now obviously my ex-husband, and he would go to work, and he had gotten cancer. He would go get a radiation treatment, lay down in the office for 3 hours, and like he'd be at work, but he really wouldn't be doing anything, and so I would think, what difference does it make? You're getting up, getting dressed, going to work, but you're not doing anything, And so how are you helping yourself? If you feel better laying in bed, lay in bed, And not everybody has that opportunity. Some people have jobs where they have to go and show up. I have clients that have to work. But so be nice to yourself after work, There's meal preparation services. There's great food that you can get in the frozen food department, where it's meal prep and you rip it off and it's still good for you. It's not like the frozen food that I ate when I was, 20 years ago. But I mean, just take care of yourself. That's the biggest thing I can say. And don't let somebody else tell you what you need to do. Decide for yourself. You know what I'm saying? I know you two both know what I'm talking about. Because
100%, yes.
yeah, as my dad said over and over, if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot help anybody else. I believe that's firmly true, because if you're not all there, it's not going to be good. You won't be Emily and you won't be Miriam, You'll just be half there. And if you say, I'm fine, I figured out one day you're going to say, I'm fine. And you're going to think, I am fine. And it's kind of a positive mind reboot, because you're saying you're not doing negatively. Well, I feel like this, or I feel like this. And it may be a lie, but it's kind of positive reinforcement in the sense of, I'm fine, I'm fine. But I was shocked one day. I said, I'm fine. And I thought, I am fine. But, you never know when it's going to happen. That's just what I learned.
Well, that is beautiful. And I think that is an excellent way to end our interview with you. And I just want to say your dad sounds amazing. And I'm so glad that he was the rebel that he was and that he fought for you. And I'm sure all of everybody that's watching and listening feels the same way. So thank you so much for joining us, Karen, and for sharing such intimate details of your mold story and being so inspiring for all of us. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I know that both of you have your own stories, and they're just as amazing, and you all are amazing, two amazing people. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to tell mine. So thank you.